Do it.
this work. Let's see.
Okay, looks like it's streaming. Let me
Oh, it
find
says
you.
it's live. I think.
Yes.
Are we? Oh, wait.
I think we are. Let me go look. There's your page. And yeah, I see me.
Live. Oh, yay. We are live. Wonderful.
Let me share this to my page.
Hi, everyone.
And now let's get it shared to the community here.
Marshall's just sharing all the different pages, and then we'll get started.
Okay, there we are. So those are set. And we can watch.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 39 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. If you don't know me, my name is Lori Beth, and I have created this show to explore the topic of transformation. And so I interview different coaches, healers, thought leaders on a range of topics. And what I'm interested in here most is exploring what more of an inner transformation, a transformation that allows one to have themselves more, to feel more alive, to feel more here, to be more of themselves. So today I'm really excited to be interviewing Marshall Burtcher. Is that how you say your last name?
Yep, good job. Good job.
And yeah, I'm so happy to have him on the show. We are going to be exploring the topic of, do you know what you need? So we're going to be talking all about needs and the essential role that they're playing in your life, in your pain, and in your personal happiness and well-being. And so I want to give a little bit of a background before we dive into the topic, of just a little bit of an intro of Marshall and who he is and his work. Marshall helps codependents and survivors of narcissistic relationships find well-being and happiness again. And so so I know you're supporting people in all kinds of ways, in helping them to, first and foremost, identify what it is that they need. Yep. And what it is that, their actual feelings, and also inherent in needs is boundaries, like yep. What works for me, what doesn't work for me. And so the topic of codependency and narcissism, in my experience, in working with many people as well, is that it's quite complex psychologically, and it can be quite crazy making for people and confusing. It's quite quite a minefield. And my experience of it, and I think we share this, is that it's so important that we have a kind of like, you have to use the mind in getting out of it. There has to be a sort of psychodynamic or understanding, or more of a sort of psychological understanding to help people see the truth of what they're experiencing, because it can be so confusing.
Yeah, they've got to have a framework to interpret the experience in a way that allows them to access their awareness of their feelings of the experience, to really get an embodied conscious awareness of, like, this is not normal and this is harmful. It's harmful to me. And then to believe it. Man, you to trust your experience, trust your understanding of what's coming in. That's the big leap right there for a lot of them.
So as we're getting started, I love it that you just brought that in. This is why I'm so excited to have Marshall on the show, because I find this to be a very complex topic. And I think you have such a beautiful way of bringing it down to earth and helping people with that framework. You've created a lot of frameworks around how to identify and see the truth of one's experience when they're in a situation that is harmful to them or abusive. And also, have helped so many people, I think, through these very simple, not easy to implement, but simple frameworks of how to identify, okay, how do you know what you need? How do you know what's working for you? How do you know what's not working for you? These very basic, I would call psychological building blocks that so many of us didn't get. And obviously, there's, this topic is very complex, but I think at the core is like, okay, you didn't have that, or or you were in a, you have developmental trauma, or you were in, some, you didn't get the skills that you needed to be able to assess what is good for you and what's not good for you, or what you need and what you don't.
Well, you were neglected, you were abused, or you're likely both.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's something you grew up with in a childhood, then you're intrinsically disconnected from your own self-awareness. You don't have a reference point to you because you were trained to be externally oriented, which means you see the world through the other person's eyes. You see yourself through their eyes. And so you define what you think, what you want, what your boundaries are, your worth, your value through their reactions to you, rather than being in contact with a reference point with inside yourself, a sense of like, how do I feel about what they're doing to me? That's not a question I was asked growing up. It was not, I can't tell you one time when I was asked, how do you feel about that? It was more like, you better tolerate it. You better just shut up and deal, or you better be grateful for what you're getting. And I'm like, so I didn't have a reference to how I felt. And when we talk about needs start off as a somatic experience. They're felt. We feel we need something. We have a hunger or an emptiness or an impulse, and we don't know what this is. And then we've got to apply the psychological component, the mind, to it, and give it a label. And neglect, especially, that's where we lost that, because that's part of neglect, is that we're not given the reflection that we needed to understand what was coming up within us. And so we walk around kind of empty and like a shell, maybe even invisible, feeling not real in the world, because we have no access, we have no reference to us. So that's a biggie. And I like to give these things names so that people can be like, oh, okay, that's what that is, right? Because we label it, then we can start to work with it cognitively. And that opens us up to actually starting to meet the need, at least at a minimum, understand that we actually have it. So, yeah.
Yeah, so beautiful. I mean, I love what you're saying, because it's what you're helping people to, like you said, like develop a framework or a map or a cognitive understanding, so that then they can start to actually feel like competency and agency in implementing it. Like even the example you gave is such a good one, because we do somatically, like the process of knowing what our needs are is, or for those of us for people who didn't learn that, there's a sense of having to, kind of go back to, okay, how do I sense my needs in the body? How do I know what feels good for me and what doesn't feel good for me? And so I love that, but it's so important. This is what I think I'm so inspired by in your work, is that I think it is so much more empowering to give people a framework and not just kind of guide them there, so that they can then do it themselves. It's like, oh, I have a reference point. I know that I need, I don't know what my needs are. Okay, I'm developing a kind of, there's a map to get there. There's a process to get there.
There's a framework you can follow that empowers you to understand and discover yourself. Because I think it's one of the biggest challenges we deal with if we're getting in the framework of like knowing who we are, dealing with well-being or happiness. Something beyond, in my framework, codependency is how, right? We're always asking that question, how? And if we don't, and we need a framework to first understand what anything we're experiencing actually means. We've got to be able to interpret it effectively, so we can make sense of it. And then from there we can go, oh, I have a need. Okay, so I have a need. How do I get it met? And I call this a really simple relating model that I created for this, because a lot of relating models felt really complex to my brain. So I reduced it to 4 basic components, and that is what, how, who, and the outcome or result. So what do I need? how does that need get met for me? Like needs, we all have 10 basic core needs, but how they get met is kind of our magic, our uniqueness, because they don't all get met in the same way for everyone. So you got to understand that how, because I find that the how is where a lot of friction happens in relationships. I know what I want, they know what they want, but how we get it met, there can be some big goals, big differences there. So we understand how we want it, then we can go out and find or develop relationships with methods that get it met. And sometimes that's internal, like I can meet some of my needs. Sometimes that's I have a need that requires someone else. Now I can go find people who already understand the need the way I do, or are willing to understand that need the way I do and meet me there, and then consensually build an agreement, or AKA a relationship and an experience of fulfilling each other's needs in a way that makes sense to each other. And that produces what I call organic chemistry or compatibility. Basically, you're working this through a discovery process. I look at relationships as a perpetual state of discovery rather than a commitment. Because I'll tell you, codependence, let's see if any, some of my students are on the live and they've heard me say this, but it's like codependents want to be in the middle of a relationship. I want to be in the middle. I want to be the committed one. Everything's flowers and sunshine. And codependency doesn't tolerate the beginning of a relationship at all very well, because of all the uncertainty and the gradualness in coming to know someone for who they are rather than what we want them to be, because I call that the codependent fantasy. And so we get into that framework there, and we slow things down and we come back to, what do I need? How do I need it? So to know what we need, that's what we're talking about tonight pretty much, is what are my needs? You know, I'm going to post a link in the chat to, if this is okay, to a infographic I use a lot, and I call it the 10 core needs. I'm just going to post it there plain, but it's so people can click on that, but there's 10 of them. And I like to give them, if we acknowledge them, it's fun to watch people activate in them. And I don't mean like anxious. I mean like, whoa, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I need. And so the first one is acceptance. And that is, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you're present. Second is attention, is I see you. So it's this acknowledgement of your physical existence. Because me growing up, that didn't happen unless there was something that needed either to be done or corrected. So I felt invisible. I didn't really understand how unreal I felt until people started paying attention and going, hey, Marshall, what about this? Hey, I really adore this about you. Or, well, you got this weird little habit over here. Can we talk about that? Because they were seeing me. I didn't feel seen growing up. I felt invisible. I wondered if I was real. Sometimes even now, I'll have to touch my body. Am I real in there? Because the brain was not taught to reference its physicality. So I see you. Third one is valued. You're special to me. Who you are is special to me. Not what you do for me, that you exist. I'm grateful you are here. And then respected. I honor your person. I honor your physicality, the being that you are. That's a biggie. And then nurtured. Your needs are important to me. And this is where a lot of people experience a lot of pain. It even comes up in me, where our needs are discarded by the other person. They're not valued, and they're even villainized or weaponized. And we're made to feel shameful or unworthy or unlovable. And then we carry this burden around for so long about these things. And we don't, that this is the ultimate disconnection from ourselves, because our needs are one of our first primal relationships to reality. And to have those attacked is to attack the essence of our existence, right? It's like, you don't belong. You don't have a right to take up space. And that's a scary place for anything to feel like they don't have a place to belong, and so survival gets really activated in that. And then the number 6 is called availability. It's, I'm here for you. I'm going to make time for you, which is the next one. These two go hand in hand, because if someone's not available, they can't make time for you. And if they make time for you and they're not emotionally available, you have an emotional vacuum. It's just like, I'm living with a ghost. What's going on here? And then the final 3 are safety, rest, and play. So your protection matters to me. You're safe to be yourself and care for yourself in my space. I'll provide shelter for you. And then play. I enjoy who you are. And play gets neglected like no other thing. I have aspirations to build a course around play to help adults get reconnected back to play. Because there's joy there, and that's where we've become alive. And I think that's one of the most important steps in retrieving ourselves from trauma and neglect, and rehabilitating our presence in the world and what we bring to the world. So
yeah, I have so many questions about all what you just shared, but one thing I'll say also about play is that it's also it creates, when we can do things from a place of play, it actually creates a lot of shifts in the brain, like in our neural pathways. It makes things a lot easier, to rewire. So it makes sense that would be such an important one. But one thing I love about this model too is that as I was listening, because I haven't heard it before, I was like, this is all the building blocks of a secure attachment, right? Like all of these, exactly what a secure attachment is. And I think sometimes, right, if you only had play, for example, or you only had some of the last ones, but you didn't have this kind of foundation before that, that's where people can also they could get into a relationship where it's like, oh, we're having so much fun together, but I don't feel safe, right? I don't feel secure in this. I'm not feeling like my needs are valued or I matter. So that's why it's like all of it is important together. Did you create this model? Is this your model?
This is my model, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I built it from the ground up. So I did quite a bit of work on my own healing from codependency and narcissistic abuse. And for me personally, there's a lot of borderline personality disorder that I have to work with and had to work out in some of those radical impulses, because my history is it's a story of neglect and abuse through religious and dogmatic systems. And then I'm a paranoid schizophrenic father who was a covert narcissist, codependent mother, who then she passed away when I was 10, and then he remarried about 11 months later. And my stepmother was very she was a borderliner with bipolar disorder, and that was that was a run. And then there was their physical and sexual abuse in the background there that really kind of shaped all of this into this package of, why do I want to exist? And I'm a stubborn person, and so I wanted to exist. I remember waking up that morning going, I want to live. I'm just done with the pain. I'm done with all this stuff going on. And how can I do this? And so I started looking at what healthy people had in their world, because I made the assumption that healthy people didn't just have this. This is not a product of who they are. This is a product of an environment, a nature-nurture kind of experience. And I'm like, what do they have that I didn't have? And I started to see these patterns, and they all reduced down for me down to needs, and how needs get met, wants, and how wants get met. And from there, I started constructing the model and going, oh, if I know what my needs are and I assume they are good and worthy, then it's about how I get them met that causes all the drama. So what skills and what mindsets, what points of view need to be in place to meet these in effective ways? And then how do I regulate the pain and anxiety and uncertainty in the center? Because you got the gap between having a need and fulfilling a need. How do I regulate that gap? And so I got into the somatic experiencing technology from Peter Levine, trained in that from a shamanic point of view, and then attachment theory and relationship dynamics. So that's where it all but I constructed the model I used based on those bits in my own journey. And then the journey that my clients had, because I used a lot of you in the early years, you knew this, I told you, you were guinea pigs. But through their experience and my experience, we started to see results pretty radically and pretty quickly. Most of my clients see results within 8 to 12 weeks. They start to see a shift, and within a year, they're moving into really solid, confident sense of self, and then they're building solid relationships out of that. And same with students. Usually within 4 weeks in a course, they start to see the shift, and 12 months out, they're building a life they really enjoy. So, yeah.
So I'm very curious about the model, and I want to hear more. And I'm also, one thing that you just said that struck me, right, is, and I think about this often in the work that I do, that at the core of so much of what we experience as humans, it's about, can we regulate our emotions, right? You just kind of said that too. It's like, I have these needs, I want to get them met. What is the best way? That's one of the questions that I think you're asking. It's like, what, and what this talk is like, right? Like, let's not go to somebody who can't meet the need or who's going to let's figure out what we need, have a roadmap, and then find the best ways to meet those needs, whether it's internal, whether it's from, a mentor, from friends, from a partner, but basically what you said at the beginning really struck me as well, that this is a model of it's like kind of a model of utility. It's like, okay, let's find the best way to let's give you a roadmap and a framework so that you can understand what it is that you need and how you can go meet those needs, how you can regulate your emotions, how you can feel good being in your own skin, how you can be realistic, right? When you're beginning relationships. And like you just said, not to put a codependency would put oneself kind of in the middle of the relationship versus okay, what is it actually like to get to know somebody and to
are we
able to meet each other's needs? Are we able to feel safe with one another? Do we feel, and that it's not just an internal thing, it's actually also it's also in the frame, it's also in this it's also in the fabric of the relationship. Each relationship has its own organic way of coming together, and how do two people in that model, how do they work together?
Make it work? Yeah.
How do they make it work?
That's the real work of a relationship, is figuring out how do we meet each other and understand each other in a way that's respectful and compassionate and honest. Because I'll tell you, codependency, we've got a fantasy. We want this person to be something for us, because that fantasy, that gets fulfilled, that means something about our value. We're worth it. We're lovable if this person will love us this way. And we have to get out of that context and meet our internal needs there, which is really about value and worth. And I call it importance, priority, and value. That's how I need to treat me first, and get really comfortable with this. Because if I can't say no, and I can't create a little chaos and a little confrontation, rock that boat in a relationship, I won't be in a relationship. I'll be in a dictatorship or something that sinks, but it's not going to be about relating. It's going to be about serving their needs over my well-being. But it's the magic of knowing each other that's the real journey.
Yeah, and what I love about what you were just sharing, there's a couple of pieces, is one, I think that you're providing a framework, but I think this is also sometimes why we need therapists and mentors and people who can actually help us to see our value and our worth.
Yeah.
Because when we didn't get that, when people didn't get that as children, right? We're relational creatures. So we may not be able to just all of a sudden someone might be like, oh,
we got to have it reflected back to us. We need a mirror.
We have to feel it from somebody else. Yeah, we have to feel like, oh, that's what it's like, and then be able to internalize that. So that's I think part of the work that you're doing. And then I was also thinking about what you just shared, kind of this whole codependency, codependency being sort of like a fantasy, like there's sort of a fantasy of the other. And in my work with early developmental trauma, I think about this all the time, because I think in the absence of having kind of getting the love that we needed as children, right? Through that sort of, you're obviously, you put yourself in that boat of having early developmental trauma. It spans a whole range of things. We have an unrealistic, because we didn't actually have what was realistic. We're sort of always chasing a hungry ghost. There's a sense of, when I have this relationship, then I'll feel good. Or or the relationship should feel like this. It's not like a realistic assessment of, like we're chasing something. And I think that's what ends up happening. That's how the nervous system gets wired, right? So there's a sense, this is what love feels like. It feels like I'm chasing. It feels like
it's this emptiness I have to pursue that sometimes I get a breadcrumb with, and then I feel euphoric, and I call that love.
Yeah.
Rather than love being stable and warm and reliable and a little bit boring for anybody who's been through the dynamic of codependency, but it's also warmth, and it's nurturing, and it's light, and it's gentle, and it's subtle. This is one of the challenges I have wrestled with, is the subtlety that enters healthy relationships. There's these just light, gentle emotions and sensations that emerge, because in codependency or in abuse and neglect, these are really intense experiences. They kind of sear us a little bit emotionally, so we kind of have a numbness to these subtleties in us, and we have to wake up and allow them to emerge, and like, that's what it's like to feel connected safely. Oh, that's really light and subtle and gentle, and trust it, lean into it, and relax, and take that poor nervous system. It's so hijacked and scared and just like, was this gonna kill us? And just bring it down. I do this. It's called touch regulation, but just bring it down. We just help it ease up, and like, cognitively, am I safe? Is this person safe? What's their pattern of behaviors towards me? They respond to me in warm and kind ways, in direct, clear, and simple ways, assertively and kindly. They haven't attacked me. I'm okay. If that's a pattern, you're dealing with someone who's, healthy. But if they're, they've got other things going on, then you put it in the context of whatever that is. But you're always regulating that nervous system to help that child expand a little bit and go, maybe I'm safe. Can I play here? Can I connect? Can I be held? Can I be accepted here? And we're doing that in each other. That's where your co-regulation comes in. It's like, well, if we're going to help each other through this kind of attachment dance that we're doing as we shape a relationship. And like, I have a relationship with a woman who has fearful avoidant attachment, and I have dismissive avoidant attachment, which means I need to be very conscious about how I'm done. I know I'm out. Got to come back into it. Got to lean into that proximity and let it warm up and go, I'm safe here. This person is safe. And I know that based on their patterns of behavior. So yeah, we're really learning how to gently, kindly care for ourselves. These deep parts of us that are felt, and to bring our cognition into our understanding and going, I'm okay here. And it's like a reparenting process, basically.
Yeah.
Can I nurture those needs that way?
Yeah, I think you described that so beautifully. I'm curious if you can maybe share a little bit about, in that example, for example, that implies that somebody would be able to both regulate their nervous system and themselves, and also be able to accurately assess certain red flags or places that are not safe. And part of the struggle, right, with kind of whether we're talking about codependency or early developmental trauma, which we can put in the same, this conversation we're essentially having.
Codependency is a product of that. So yeah.
And I almost think, I'm sure you look at it this way, but it's on a gradation, because I think probably every human has what you're calling codependency. Every human has places where they're like, they don't that, you know, they don't, maybe they're not, maybe not every human, but I think most humans.
I think most people really struggle with attachment, and they struggle with keeping their individuality and merging with another and losing themselves. And they don't know where the balance is. They don't understand the importance and sovereignty of self in relationship to the importance of other, because we live in a narcissistic system that says others are prime. I call this primacy, and their emotions are prime, their needs are prime, and we give to those needs. And then there's the implied promise that they would do the same to us. And in narcissistic dynamics, that's how they get you trapped, because the implied promise is that they care about us the way we care about them. And that isn't always the case. And we have to be really conscious about that. So the way I help my clients and students see reality is to look at the pattern of behaviors that are occurring in this person. And the key is patterns. What do they continually repeat? Mm-hmm. So once I can identify that, can I identify how I continually feel around them? What's my pattern of feeling, my pattern of behavior? And if those things are abusive, if those things are neglectful, if it feels empty, then we need to start hitting the brakes on the progression of this relationship and start identifying what's really going on. I call it sane making. And then from there, we can start making honest decisions about what we need to do with the relationship, sans what we feel. Because for a lot of us, we stay in relationships because of what we've felt, not for its functionality. And that's a big, big mistake, because we're going to stay in things that harm us because we have a fantasy that the functionality will change and we'll get more of what we have been feeling. I call it the sad cycle: seduction, abuse, discard, puts us into this fantasy. So what we do is we identify those patterns, both in their behavior, because we can't know what they feel. We can only know what they tell us they feel and what we sense they feel. I'm a big fan of not trying to mind read there. But I can know what I feel. And if I don't know what I feel, I can't make an accurate judgment as to whether or not this relationship is fundamentally compatible for my well-being and happiness. So again, it comes back to, can I access myself? Do I even know what that is? Right. And I find that when people get in contact with those 10 core needs, they start to find their value. I call it innate value, this sense of worth that is like in them. It's not externally put there. It's like, oh, I'm valuable. And from there comes this voice, this awareness about, hey, I don't like that. That stops. Or nope, don't want that. Or yep, I want that. So these real basic impulses start to show up and guide them.
Interesting. Wow, I really like that. So it's almost like, because I was going to ask, that was one of the questions I had. It was kind of like, how does one even know, you know, how, like, that's part of the struggle, right? Like, how does one know how they, for lack of a better word, should be feeling? And obviously it's different for everybody, but you know, we want to be, it's like, if you've always lived in a certain way and your nervous system's patterned a certain way, then you're going to believe certain patterns of behavior, certain thoughts are what is real. And so what you're doing is you're helping people to retrain that, right? And so, but it sounds like part of it is that by having these 10 core needs, it's like a map that people can say, oh wait, am I feeling like, do I feel like
seen?
Do I feel seen? Does this person
respected?
When I share something that is challenging, does this person, you know, are they responsive? Are they, you know, loving? Or do they kind of, you know, disregard me? So
how do they behave?
How do they behave? So it sounds like you're kind of, I mean, and I like what you said. It's like once you identify those needs and you start to, like, someone has them now in their cognitively, it's like, okay, is this happening in the relationship? Then they, even by like seeing that there are these needs, having the roadmap, they start to feel like, oh, this is how I should be valued as a person. This is what it starts. So then they get the somatic experience of, this is what it feels like to be valued. And then what you're saying is from there, they're able to, when you feel more valued, you have more of a sense of your needs, then your impulse, the healthy impulses start to come back. And then of course, I'm sure you're working with people, obviously, to kind of, obviously you're supporting them to think through, well, okay, how did that feel? And it felt way, and that actually didn't. So actually, let's look at that. Did that actually, That doesn't
Yeah.
sound like it felt very good. Can we go
Yeah.
into that more and try to understand?
Let's acknowledge what you feel. So there's this practice I teach, which is it's acknowledgement and legitimization, and then that can lead to advocacy. Okay, so I need to acknowledge what I'm aware of in my awareness. So if we struggle to know what we feel and think, we've got to move the scale back to, let's develop some awareness. Let's get connected back to body and go, well, what is here? What's happening, body? It's been a long time. Body's like, well, you really like donuts. You can tell by our stomach, it'll have things to say. But what's important is we start to build this awareness, and that's a reconnection. And then it starts to talk. And then our job is to listen. We don't listen. We analyze, resist, and attach to things. But what's cool is when we start to listen, then we start to, hey, that did not feel good to me. And I do this in a really simple way. Pre-COVID, I sent people to the store, and I had them walk around the store and listen to their bodies as they walked around. Like, what does that person over there feel like to you? What is that piece of clothing? Go over to the fruit stand, hold some fruit. Does your body want it? Does your body not want it? And get them to start the wrestle of listening to themselves. It's like, oh, I'm not even sure I do want that. Cool. Now we've identified one of your voices, which is confusion. I don't know what I want. Maybe I want that. Oh, now we've got our maybe voice. Ooh, I really want that. We found your yes voice, your desire impulse. No, disgusting. I don't want that. Those are your 4 impulses. That's your no impulse. That way you can structure boundary and you can structure agreement, because you know what you want. You don't want you know what you want. If you don't know what you want, you can clarify it. And if you're confused, you stop the process and step back and start to see what's going on. Because my experience with my own journey and that of sometimes I call my people, is that we ignore our confusion. Mm-hmm. We bypass it. And confusion's a red flag. It's an important signal that we're not seeing things, or something is being done to obfuscate reality. So I have to slow down and go, what's really happening here? Because in my own experience, confusion was the red flag that I'm being manipulated. I'm being gaslit, basically. Told reality is one way, but my experience was not that way. So, that immediately will create cognitive dissonance, right? This confusion. So I train them to sense into and acknowledge these things. So once you can acknowledge it, then you can move to the next step, which is called legitimization. And legitimization is about building trust in the primacy of your experience. In other words, this matters. My feelings about what I've experienced matter, period. They don't change in value because so-and-so doesn't think they matter. They have an inherent value and priority and importance. When that's established, then we can start the advocacy process. When I believe my feelings, my thoughts, my perceptions matter, now I can advocate. I can say yes. I can say no. I can say, this doesn't make sense. We need to talk about it. And this is where a really direct, clear, and simple approach for communication emerges. I see it all the time. I had one student, she'd give me this long dialogue about why she wouldn't do something. And then she started the processes. And about 6 weeks later, she's like, no, not doing that. Done. I'm like, look at you. Look at the change. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's like 3 words. You said 3 words to this person. You were done. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, go back 6 weeks and look at what you said then. She's like, oh, I did tend to talk a lot. I'm like, yeah, because you're justifying it rather than going, I don't care. I'm done. No, stop it. And that's where we're getting into that beauty of the voice and coming back to the self.
Wow, I love that. I mean, I just love how you've kind of created all of these processes that I actually use all of this in my work intuitively or just in my training, but it's in my experience of it, but it like you put it into kind of a map that really sounds like it works for people. Like it really gives people these kind of empowering steps which that's what I think that's what I'm so blown away by in your work. And I'm so appreciative of, because I think, like I said at the beginning, this can be such a, like, it can feel so complex inside, right? Like even taking that example, the kind of over analysis of, oh, let's say I'm at the grocery store, and like even your simple, like even that example to me is like helping people, you're helping train people in what we should have all learned from as little kids. Yes, no, this feels good. This doesn't feel good. Kind of like on an intuitive body level, right? Like when a child is in a safe environment, then they're able to develop that. So but I think what ends up happening, right, is that there's all this analysis and justification that people go through because they don't know, first of all, they don't know what they're actually feeling, they're not trusting it, and they're not valuing it, right? So then you're saying, once you can do all those things, then it like what your client experienced, which is amazing, is like 6 weeks later, she's just like, instead of there being any rationalization, she's just like, no, that doesn't feel right, the end. And to trust that, and that there's no justification needed. You get to just, you get to have your experience, and
you get to occupy your space your way. It's your rules, your domain.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like in your experience that with this process, people are really able to stop that kind of mistrust of self. Like there is, that it can happen pretty quickly because that's what I find to be one of the hardest things, I think, for people that I've seen, is to kind of like, I just find this with clients all the time, is that it's very hard to stop the pattern of there's a lot of patterning around what we do with our needs and our boundaries, because people are scared.
A lot of dancing around it.
Exactly. There's a lot of dancing around it. I find that to be one of the core things that I think makes it very challenging for people to, I would say, just even, I mean, back to the original topic, feel good and feel happy, because if you're spending time doubting your internal experience, right? Or you're spending so much time like, what do I actually feel and what's needed? And is this the right relationship? Is it not the right relationship? Or,
or regulating the other person. I mean, for poor codependents, we're obsessed with regulating their feelings. So is my need going to get them upset? Is it going to make them mad? Is it going to cause them to do something? Because we regulate our safety against their emotional state of being. And so we have no connection. We that analysis is our best effort to navigate the chaos of something we have no means of really understanding, because we weren't given the definitions or the rules of the game. And if we have, like, for instance, narcissistic parents, then they change the rules. They move that goalpost. So you're like, well, that didn't work. And you start to feel crazy because you don't have a relationship to any consistency that helps you meet your need for, at least at a minimum, safety, because that's the base need we all have. Am I safe? Then can I ask for what I need? Then can I ask for what I want? Then can I be who I am? If we don't have that, then we have that wrestle, and we think we're going to get it wrong, and we're scared of the consequence that comes if we get it wrong. And so what's cool with self-trust is that there isn't a wrong answer. It's just you don't want it. So that's it.
And it's better, right? We could both argue too that it's better that you trust yourself, and maybe then, okay, well, I left this, and in retrospect, I feel like, well, the person was safe. Great. Well, at least you.
Now you understand it better, but you didn't make a mistake, right? Yeah. To release the judgment, I call it condemnation, because a lot of people speak in a way that leads me to feel like they condemn themselves for mistakes. And I'm like, you just learned, you just understood yourself. Now we have a piece to the next step. The mindset model I use is all about discovery. You not give up finding the answers and the conclusions, find out what happens, and let's go from that awareness, because eventually you will discover the outcomes you're looking for. We're just going to let the process teach you and grow you and allow you to shed the shame, for instance, that you might hold about your needs, and bring in love and respect and a little bit of trust in there. And you start getting this very different experience of yourself. And then, we grow. So,
But I'm hoping on my end. But so I'm really curious if you want to speak. So we're talking about codependency, right? And there's obviously different levels. There's different kinds of relationships that people get into, right? And there's like helping themselves.
Would you repeat that? Because you broke up a bit.
Oh, I did. People can hear me. So what?
Technology today. Let's see if she comes back here.
Can you hear?
I can hear part of you. You're coming back in. Let's see what happens here. And I can also make a stab just to bridge the gap. So yeah, different kinds of relationships, different gradients of codependency and attachment versus or attachment and enmeshment versus connection. And I think a lot of that has to deal with one's sense of security within inside themselves and their willingness to allow themselves to be individual and allow the other one to be individual and meet in the middle so that there's a trust that we would be understood in that experience and received there. A positive warm regard would be the term that's typically used for that, or generosity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Can you hear me now? Am I back?
I can hear you now, yes.
Oh, great. Thanks for filling the gap. Thanks. I'm in Bali and the internet is a little suspect here. So yeah. What I was actually at, thank you for sharing all of that and, sharing. There's so much that you could share, obviously, because you just have created these such beautiful models for this. And I'm just again, just really moved and grateful because this is important for everyone. I really believe that we need, I don't know if you've thought about teaching this to kids or,
if I could figure out how to make that work, it'd probably be somebody else's gift, but I gladly work with them to translate it to children.
I've worked with kids.
And then we could do something there. It's come across my mind a fair bit. My children are like teenagers. My son's almost an adult. My daughter's a teenager. So I'm way outside that phase. But I think that would be very powerful to help children understand because they're all in their bodies. Kids are just rooted in their bodies and they're doing what the body wants to do. And I help them understand what these doings in their bodies, these impulses they feel, what they mean, and how to get those met. I think that would be fantastic. That would be really cool.
I mean, can you hear me?
I can hear you a little bit, yeah.
Right.
How are you? Yeah. So those of you that are watching, what questions do you have? We'll deal with the gaps with questions. We'll play with that because I know I'm coming in strong. So. Oh, here's something you guys can use right off the bat. When it comes to needs and you want to know what your need is, I use a question. I'm a big fan of questions. And the question is, what is my body trying to tell me? And then just take a moment and see whatever shows up and take it. Because you'll find it'll respond well, I'm upset, or I need space, or I'm hungry, or I don't like that thing. And then you're starting to get a dialogue with yourself there, and you can use that to tap into your needs. And then what I do is I have my clients or students look at that needs list I posted in the comments and then see which ones line up. Which ones does your body respond to the most? And then you can start meeting that need.
Mm-hmm. So, beautiful.
Let's see. Oh, you're coming in again, so that's good. Little bit broken up, but better.
Oh man. Well, thank you for filling the gap. I was going to ask you if you could speak a little bit before we end about since we've been talking about codependency, if you could speak about working with survivors of narcissistic abuse or narcissistic relationships, because I think we're talking on different, there's different levels, right, of kind of the kinds of relationships that people can get into, and the kind of sort of narcissistic psychopathic relationship that can, that is much, I think, much harder for people to identify and get out of because of the nature of how crazy making and gaslighting and all of that.
Trauma bonding gets you in there with that. Yeah. A lot of people experience codependency in what's called avoidant attachment relationships. And that's a different dynamic because that's an attachment dysfunction that can be resolved. Narcissistic dynamics are fundamentally different because the narcissist is using the target, the codependent or non-codependent that gets swept into their web, as something called supply. So supply is whatever makes the narcissistic individual feel alive. And it's usually attention of some sort. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. It matters that it's happening. And then they feel entitled. This is important, guys. Abusive people have a sense of entitlement to get what they want from you, because they see you as an object. They don't register you as a sovereign human being with feelings and needs and wants that matter and are valuable. They just see you as a cookie, and they want their cookie, and they're going to do what they can to get you to give them your cookie. And that is called seduction. This is where they're love bombing you. They're giving you grandiose praise. So you've known the guy for 5 days, and he's like, "You're the best thing in the world. We should get married next week." Red flag. Big, I walk away. He's claiming to know you, and he's only known you a month or 2 months or 3 months. Whoa, you want to start like, time to put the brakes on this puppy. He is gently but persistently pushing past your nose. So he'll say no, and then he'll hem and haw, or he might have a little pouty, and then he'll try again. He'll try again. He'll try again. That's important because what they're doing is a boundary test. They're trying to figure out what your tolerance is for this behavior and to figure out if they can manipulate you into saying yes. Healthy people are not going to do that because they're not trying to get something from you. Healthy people are trying to understand who you are. It's really important there. So this function of supply, they want to consume you. And then once they have you, and they've got their cookie, what they're going to begin to do, everything they've praised you about, like your looks or your talents or the person you show up as, they're going to start attacking that. They're going to take the sensitive information you've divulged to them over time or whatever. They're going to use that against you. They're going to figure out what matters to you, and they're going to start to attack that. And the goal here, this is called the abuse cycle. The goal here is to get you submissive so you'll give them what they want when they want it. Because the idea is to destroy your sense of value, so you destroy your sense of, or you give up or lower your shields. Your boundaries become useless to you. And then they can use you how they want. And then when they're tired of you, they discard you. This can happen within 5 minutes in a relationship cycle like this. It can be a one-off event where they use you and they discard you and never see them again. But most of the time, this happens repeatedly in the relationship dynamic. And it's what leads you to feeling euphoric when they give you a little love, feeling utterly distressed and confused and panicked about losing the relationship. So you try to change yourself. You try to do it better. You try not to walk on the eggshells. You try to communicate better. You try to change yourself, yada, yada, yada. And then when they discard you, you go into despair because you feel like you failed, that you're the one with the problem, that you're worthless, because they keep telling you, it's you keep doing this. You didn't do this. What about that? When you did this, what about this thing over here? You promised this, and they just hammer you. And then you feel crazy. You've lost your sense of self because you're not in your body. You're emotionally dissociated, and you're just kind of a zombie, a ghost, a foggy, and you don't know what is up from down. That's that my clients and students have survived. That's what I help them get out of, so that they can break the cycle and go, okay, what's real? Because that's the first question. You got to know what's real. And then we got to start accessing it and building trust in it based on, first of all, patterns of behavior, both in them and then how you behave and how you feel in response to what's going on.
And thank you for describing that. And I think it's so important because the difference of what you said between like an avoidant, a relationship with someone who might be avoidant and codependent, and there's a workability there, because it's not, versus this kind of other kind of relationship, which really there isn't workability. And I think that what ends up happening is people stay in it because they keep thinking, okay, this is going to change. This is going to change.
Yeah, they give him promises about change. And then there's these little breadcrumbs the narcissistic person will throw at them that gives them the sense that there's a change, but they're ignoring the overall pattern, that the breadcrumb is a manipulation. A breadcrumb would be like an apology without change of behavior. But in healthy dynamics, or people that are working out some shit in their world, sorry guys, but I swear, there is a fundamental principle of ownership in action. It's alive in the relationship, that people are willing to own what they feel, own what they want, own what they choose, and own how they act. And then there's empathy. There's a concern about the impact on both parties' parts. They both care. Narcissists don't give a shit. They might act like they care, but you'll notice in a narcissistic vein of empathy, it's still about them. Well, I really care about you, and I don't understand why you would do this to me. Why would you say no to me when I really care about you? They think that's empathy, and it's not. It's a victimization.
And an inability to empathize and acknowledge your experience, the other person.
They don't understand. Fundamentally, the narcissistic brain thinks everybody thinks the way they do, and those that don't are broken in some way, and they just need to change.
Yeah.
So there's no theory of mind there.
Yeah. Thank you for describing that. And I want to actually, I think this is a good place to end, also because we're almost at an hour.
Yeah, we've been going for a bit.
Maybe we'll come on again, because this is a great topic. I just love what you're doing, Marshall. And I want to just stress for people that it's just so important. I think my experience of this is helping people who have also been survivors from narcissistic abuse and in these codependent patterns. It's so important to work with somebody to see it clearly. Like, that's the first step, I think, because in my experience, people, it's very, especially in a narcissistic dynamic, it's almost basically impossible to be able to see oneself clearly. Yeah. And there's often, even from people that I've seen who are relatively healthy, once they get into that kind of dynamic, they start to feel so crazy that they can't see up from down. Yep. So I think it's so important to work with someone. And I really just want to highly recommend Marshall and his work and his systems, because I think that and I know you have communities where people, you're speaking about this. And so when someone's in a relationship that's not working, it's like, okay, it's like this opportunity to start to see the signs and actually, and when you feel validated, like, oh my God, I'm not alone with this. This isn't something that, I'm not making this up, or it's not just me. And so that's what I'm so grateful for what you are offering. And I'd love for people to know how to kind of find your work and learn more about your programs and,
So you can find me at my website, which is freetheself.com. So freetheself.com. And then on Facebook, you can look up Healing Codependency and Trauma. That'll be my Facebook page. My community is called Thriving Beyond Codependency Community, and that's also on Facebook. And then you can follow me on Instagram at Happiness After Codependency. And the programs, I have three core programs I run. One called From Addiction to Connection, which heals the trauma bond. And the Crazy Making helps you restore sanity, peace, and connection. The second one's called the Happiness Strategy, where we tap you back into your value, voice, and vision so you can know, love, and live who you really are. And then the third one is called the Relationship Strategy, where we build the what, how, and who so you can get the result of a happy, healthy relationship in your world. So you can access the information on those courses on my website. So
great. Well, and I want to say, I think Marshall has these very proven and sort of step-by-step processes.
Results-based, yes.
Really, which really I haven't seen out there. So I just really, again, want to highly recommend, following him and his programs. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed this conversation, even with the technology breaks. Thanks for filling it in. And
Oh,
I
welcome.
hope we can continue this conversation because it's so important. It's so needed right now. I mean, it's
Oh,
such a huge
definitely.
topic.
Well,
Um,
thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me. I really appreciate the time and getting a chance to share on what I do and my own journey in this, and that you
Yeah.
can be free. It's
Yeah.
that's my message, is that you're not crazy, that you really are worth knowing, loving, and keeping, and that you can discover and know that for yourself. And I can help you out with that.
Beautiful. Yeah. So once again, my name is Lori Beth, and I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm also do psychospiritual mentorship work with women. And I also work with some of these same dynamics, and just I offer a program that really kind of assesses and addresses every level of your being, and works with. I work a lot with early developmental trauma. Part of my vision is to help people, similarly to Marshall, to get off. I mean, you didn't say it this way, but for me, it's to get off the endless sort of wheel of self-development and sort of
Oh yeah,
trauma looping so that we
start
can
living
actually
life.
start living life. So in that same regard. So if you're interested in my programs, please reach out to me. I'm also offering a rewiring money intensive that's coming up. Enrollment closes tomorrow, and it's
Nice.
basically for women, and it's about rewiring your relationship to money through the body and the nervous system so that you can really choose how you want to see how you want your relationship with money to be,
Oh,
and
that's
then
cool.
create moment to moment steps to get there. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Thanks again, Marshall.
You're
And
welcome.
yeah, okay, bye
Hey, have a
everyone.
good evening, guys.